right, today's Daf Kuf. Shabbos is Daf. We're picking it up at the very bottom of Tzadi Testament Beis. The Mishnah had said that if the Gid Anosha was cooked with other Mutter Dika Gidim, and they're all mixed up together, they're all going to be Usr, because the reason is, you got to be worried, you might come to eat the actual Gid Anosha. So even though it's not necessarily Noisein Tam, because of the amount that's connected, it doesn't matter. But to that Frekta Gemara, V'liv Til Beruba. This is a classic case of Yavesh B'Yavesh, where we know there's an existence of the halacha of Bittul B'Raiv, so why can't we just be Samech on that? Moving over to Mid Aleph, and for the Gemara, Beria Shiny. You're right, we would have been Samech on Raiv, but you can't hear specifically, because there's no Bittul by a Beria, by a Dover Choshev, which is a whole creation. So the first subject we got to discuss here is, in general, Bittul. Whenever you have this idea of a Yavesh B'Yavesh, that the Raiv is Mevatel the Miyat, what's the status of that Miyat? Is it Nishapech? Is it gone? Can I eat all of these objects? The Rush, who's the most makel of all, says, yeah, it's mutter. Not only is it mutter to eat all of them, but you can eat all of them at the same time. The Rajba doesn't want to take it so far. The Rajba, the Teres Abaya, says, yeah, it's mutter to eat all of them, but you can't eat them all at the same time. Taisvis, by us, the top Taisvis says, Shema, it's going to be usher for the same person to eat all of them. And the way the Piskei Taisvis brings this Taisvis, as you look up the Piskei Taisvis, he makes it that Taisvis really holds it's usher to eat all of them. And the Beis Yosef, when he brings this idea of Taisvis, he brings it b'shem the smag, that it's taka usher to eat all of them. And then you have Rashi Shita, Rashi in Avodah Zarah and Dafayin Daled Roman Aleph, says that you have to get rid of one of the pieces. In other words, you got to make it possible that the Raiv actually did its job, and therefore there's no more Isser here. So you got to chuck one of the pieces away and give it to the Kalav. That's a very important machlekes about the Chlal Bittul and what the Gemara's kash is over here. Now, in terms of the Gemara's teretz, that a Beria is shiny, the definition of a Beria, we touched this already, but over here is where the Ran writes that you have to have a few qualifications for something to be a Beria. Number one, it has to be Usr from when it was first created, like a Gid HaNasha, from its creation, it's already Usr, as opposed to a Nevela that becomes Usr later. Also, it has to be something that was alive, like an insect or an animal, as opposed to a piece of wheat that doesn't have its own neshama, if you will. And lastly, it has to be whole and not if it's cut up into pieces. The Shulchan Aruch and Simon Kuf actually adds another one, that a Beria has to be something that loses its name when it's cut up. Like a Gid HaNasha is not called a Gid HaNasha when it's cut up, as opposed to Chalev, that even when it's smaller, it's still called Chalev. Then the Mishnah said, V'chein chaticha shel nevela, and also the not kosher fish, which was cooked together with the kosher stuff, they're all going to be usher. That's what the Mishnah had said. For the Gemara, the same kasha v'ti batal beruba, which the Gemara says, it's also not going to be batal because of another idea of something that's choshev. And now we're going to get into defining how it becomes choshev. So, there's a machlekes in the third paragraph of Arla about things that are darkei limanis, things that you count, that you sell independently, that they are choshev and therefore they're not batal. But there's a shaila in Masechta Beya and Dav Gimel, whether it's es shadarkei limnais or kol shadarkei limnais. Does it exclusively have to be sold individually or just sometimes? That's a machlekes over there. So our Gemara is telling too, if you hold kol shadarkei limanos sheninu, even though it's only sometimes, but then ela liman da omer es shadarkei limanos sheninu, something that's exclusively counted independently, ma'ikal, remember, what are you going to say? Because only things that are always counted individually, like certain kinds of chashav fruits, that's where it won't be batal. But here, l'chayr, it should be batal, because the basar and the fish slices are not always counted. So it's like the Gemara, shani chaticha, because of the new rule here, hayal v'ru'uy l'schabed ba lifnei ha'erachim. Since it's chashav enough to serve to the guests, it's a chaticha ru'uy l'schabed, and therefore that's why it's not going to be batal. Important machlekes rishonim about the definition of chaticha ru'uy l'schabed. The Ran says it has to be ready to give to the erachim now. It has to be actively chashav right now. But the Rosh says, it doesn't have to be now, even if after you're going to cook it, it is still something that you would serve to your guests. So the Rosh's version of Chaticha Haru'i L'Schabed is much more expansive. Now, so like the Gemara Tzricha, I need both of these cases of the Gid HaNasha and the meat/fish, that they're both not going to be batal. It's the same halacha. And so the Gemara, because Yashmin and Gid, because Mishum Deberyahi, Aval Chaticha Emalei, Yashmin and Chaticha, Hayel V'Ru'uy L'Schabed both Nei Archim Aval Gid Emalei. So because of that, they're both two independent halachas, therefore Tzricha. It's interesting how the Gemara here, this Tzricha is not like a typical Tzricha that gives us the svaras. It's just simply telling us that there's two different halachas. It's a little bit more unique tzrichasa. Okay, new Gemara. Dorish Rabba Bar Barchana, that Rabba Bar Barchana was saying in a public shir, Chaticha shel nevela v'shel dag tami, if you got this shtikala nevela or not kosher fish that was put into a pot of soup that has lots of kosher stuff in it, and now you want to be mevatel it, Eino Eiseres, it's not going to make the whole pot usher, ad shetitein tam bereitev ubekefe uvechatichais. The only way the tam of your not kosher stuff is going to usher everything else is if that same tam goes into everything that's there, meaning the liquid, the solid, the pieces, everything that's in the whole cholent and soup has to now be flavored by the davar aser. And what this gets into is the idea of chanan, of chaticha nas and nevela, because the idea of chaticha nas and nevela says that that thing that it goes into now, it's not just the iser itself that you're being mevatel, but it's the whole chaticha now becomes aser. And therefore you need to have a bigger shear to go connect it. This also has to do with the sugya of efshar l'sachdai mutter, which is whether or not does the piece itself that became not kosher because of the tam went into it, does that piece remain usher once it's batal or not? It's a very similar but independent machlokes from chaticha nas nevela. Anyway, he was saying this in Shir, that it has to be nice and tam into everything in the pot. So uki Rav Amayra alei v'darash. So as was the typical, the Shir Kloli was said to a Talmud that would announce it to everybody and be like his PA system. And he said, Kivin shenasan tam bechaticha, once that dvar aser puts tam into the dvar heter, chaticha atzma nas nevela, that new piece becomes a shtick iser itself. V'isers kol chatichas kulin. Why? Mipnei she'im mina, because they're all the same min, meaning it's the min b'minai, hearkening to Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, that min b'minai is ein batal, and that's why it's going to aser everything. Frek the Gemara, Omer le'er Safar Labaya, Michti, Rav Kaman Omer l'shmaite. Who's he saying this like? Rabbi Yehuda da Omer min b'minai le'batal? It sounds like you're dealing dafka with Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, but my iri kinas and tam. If that's the case, that we're saying it's because of Rabbi Yehuda's min b'minai le'batal, it shouldn't matter that it was nice ein tam. I feel ki loinas and tam nami. So why would Rabbi Yehuda even be relevant if it's min b'minai? Which the Gemara says Omer le'er Zakta Baya Hachava Mayaskina and Bishakad and Vasilkai. There is no min b'minai because the thing was taken out. The only thing that's left behind is just the taste of it. So now we got to handle the taste. And since the taste is still going to be there, therefore it's a min b'minai le'batal. So that's a bias mahal. But Rava Omer turning over Tamid Beis, I feel a tamo like of the silko. You didn't take the thing out. And tak is min b'minai. We really shouldn't have to even come on to the tam, but have a min u'minai v'davar acher. There's something else there. There's the min and the same min and then something else. Like say like the soup and the spices and all that kind of stuff. Min uminai v'davar acher, then salakis minai k'misheino. Then we look at the min b'minai as if it's not there, and then v'she'ein minai rava alei and umavatli. So now once you make it ois min b'minai, now it's min v'she'ein minai because of that third party thing, and therefore that chiddush is necessary to say even like Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. Zot the Mishnah noyeg b'tahira. The Isser Gidanasha is dafka by a kosher animal, ve'ena noyeg b'tameya. It's not neget and not kosher animals. But Rabbi Yehuda omer af b'tameya. Omer Rabbi Yehuda, I'll show you a raya. V'halei mibnei Yaakov ne'eser Gidanasha. Wasn't Gidanasha usher even by the time of the Shivtei Ka? The pasuk says, Al kein lo yoichel b'nei Yisrael is Gidanasha. Etc. And at that time, they could eat not kosher animals. Because as Rashi says, until they got to Maimon Har Sinai, they were not muzer in the Torah, and they weren't muchiyah to keep it. So you see, there's an Isser Gidanasha, and they're allowed to eat not kosher animals, therefore Gidanasha should be applicable to non-kosher animals. Amrullah, they said back to Rabbi Yehuda, the Sinai Ne'amar Ela Shenichta B'mkaimai. You're right, the Isser was said by Har Sinai, but it was written in the appropriate place in the Torah. But it really didn't kick in until Sinai. And therefore, just like the kosher animal Isser wasn't there until Sinai, so therefore the Gidanasha wasn't either. So it's interesting, the way Rashi is learning this, it's almost like the Torah stuck in the pasuk out of order. La'achar shenemer b'Sinai, Rashi says. After it was said in Sinai, then it was stuck into the psukim in the right place chronologically. And this is where the Rambam in the Pirush Mishnah says his very classic Yisoid, only binding mitzvahs in the Torah are the ones that were said by Sinai. And the reason we follow it is not because of what the Malach told Yaakov Avinu, but it's because of what Moshe Rabbeinu was told on Har Sinai. Dr. Gemara, V'savar Rabbi Yehuda Isser Chalal Isser, the whole idea of Gidanasha being Chalal, not kosher animal, l'chayra, gets us into an issue of Isser Chalal Isser. V'hatanya Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Yachal Tehei Nivlas Oif Tamei Mitame Begadim Beis Abliya Tamad Lemer Nevelu Treifel Lo Yechel Tama Ba Mishi Isura Mishum Bal Teichel Nevela Yatazeh Shein Isura Mishum Bal Teichel Nevela Ela Mishum Bal Teichel Tameya. So just like in the same way that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the dead bird is not shaykh to Nevela, because when the bird dies, it's already Usser, also being a not kosher bird, and therefore we're not going to be able to stack Isurim because they ain't Isser Chalal Isser. And so in the same way here also, there should be no Isser Gidanasha on a not kosher animal because it's already Usser. But now you want to say maybe it's because Kasavar Ein Begida than B'nai Sein Tam. There is no Tam at all of the Gidanasha. Who B'Tmei Nami Isser Gid Ika Isser Tumaleka. And therefore by the not kosher animal as well, there's only the Gidanasha Isser, but there's no non-kosher Isser. Because if the Gid doesn't have any Tam at all, it's considered like an inedible object, and therefore it's never shaykh to the Isser of not kosher meat. And therefore there's no pre-existing Isser to say Ein Isser Chal Isser. But is that shaykh V'Savar Rabbi Yehuda Ein Begida B'nai Sein Tam? I've Tanya the Bryce says not that way. Ha'ich Gidanasha Shal B'Hemet Tamei Rabbi Yehuda is Mechayiv Shtaim and Rabbi Shimon is Paiter. So clearly according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Gidanasha of a not kosher animal is going to be usher, just like not kosher meat. So once again, we have the same problem. Whatever happened to Nisr Chal Isser? And therefore it is taka usher is not kosher meat. The reason why Gidanasha is going to be shaykh because he holds that the Gidanasha was also applicable to the unborn uber from the moment of its creation, which is also when the Isser of not kosher meat starts. The Isser Gid, the Isser Tuma, Bahadi Adikasi. So they're being both created at the same time, and one is not pre-existing to the other to have a problem of a Nisr Chal Isser. Can you say that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Gidanasha is going to apply to the shalil, to the unborn animal? But now we learned in the Mishnah earlier, Noheg b'shalil, Rabbi Yehuda Eimer, Ein noeg b'shalil. Zok the Gemara, hani mi legabe tahira. That was only legabe a kosher animal. The Rahman Omer kol babehema teichelu. That means any part of that geshachten animal, including the gida nosha, is all going to be mutter to eat. Avol b'tamei noeg. But by a non kosher animal, where that pasuk wasn't talking about because we weren't saying teichelu, then the gida nosha isser will even apply to the unborn uber, and therefore it's shaykh that the gida nosha and the non kosher isser happened at the same time at the creation of this uber. Okay, I know we're in the middle of this a little bit, but we're going to stop now and pick it up from the Umi Matzis Amrit for Sunday's daf.